the impact of private equity on two distinct groups of companies. One, the MSPs themselves, and two, the vendors who sell to the MSPs. Private equity is having an undeniable impact on the managed services profession today. We all know this. It's having an impact on the MSPs themselves. It's having an impact on customers. It's having an impact on vendors who sell to the MSPs. It's a pronounced effect that it's having, and it's largely good. But we have to take stock. We have to evaluate all things and see how they're actually impacting the economy, the managed services profession at large, in order to understand, A, if something needs to change, or understand if something needs to continue. And I think that we're at a good spot to be able to look back at 10 plus years of private equity, see exactly what the impact they have had, have an honest discussion about it, and look to the future to see how private equity can continue to have this impact on our profession. That's what we're going to do today. So first, I want to say, as always, right, we have a finite amount of time with these programs, and there's no way I'm going to be able to get to all of the material that I would. This is probably 3, 4, 5 hours of material if we really explored it at a leisurely pace. So I'll say this, little plug here. If you are interested in private equity, if you are interested in mergers, acquisitions, if you're looking to buy MSPs, if you're an MSP and you're looking to transition out, if you are looking to stay in the business but you want one of your partners out of the business, and there's a number of reasons why you would be interested in this type of topic. I urge you to go to and sign up today for MSP World Inspire. It's going to be in Las Vegas in September. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be a couple of days of just incredibly deep, really productive conversations on a wide variety of topics, all related to MSPs and largely produced by MSPs themselves. So you're going to hear from MSPs, actually, not other people who think they know what MSPs are doing, but actual MSPs, hear what they have to say about this topic, and I guarantee you private equity is going to be on the agenda. All right. To summarize or to kind of categorize what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to split up the impact of private equity on two distinct groups of companies. One, the MSPs themselves, and two, the vendors who sell to the MSPs. Now I'm going to start with the vendors just because in not numerical order, but in sequence, right, in order of the timeline. The vendors were the first group of companies to really have substantial interaction with the private equity community. And that started around 2010. And I don't remember if it was Autotask first or if it was Kasei or Connected, but there's like a short period of time of maybe 18 months where I'll go back and look at my notes because we wrote a lot of op-eds back then covering this, where the original founding slate of equity owners in those companies started to transition out or to take on new equity partners to fuel growth and expansion and all that fun stuff. And I remember when it happened, there was a lot of, actually there wasn't a lot of buzz. I mean, we were the only ones really talking about it. I mean, certainly you had Wall Street, you had economists looking at this, tracking this, but it was a very different time in 2010, 2011, when these early companies were, getting private equity funding and really starting to change not only the board, right, the equity owners who actually owned the company, but also eventually it changed the leadership, right? So you had, in some of the companies, you had equity owners change, and then they brought in completely new management teams to drive the growth of the company. Not all. There were some notable exceptions to that where there was equity ownership, but there was a consistency of the legacy owners and operators who had been with the company since the beginning, who continued on. Since that time, we now have witnessed what can only be described as a consolidation of the legacy MSP vendors. That is to say, vendors who sold to MSPs, sold technology, hardware, software, services, or combination of all those to the MSP profession. Right? When I say vendor, that's what I mean. We know what happened. There was a massive amount of consolidation. So you had backup vendors that started to get acquired. You had ticketing vendors who started to get acquired. You had RMM vendors who started to get acquired. You had security vendors who started to get acquired, and so on and so on. And you had a consolidation of those vertical markets, and you had what eventually became like the big four. Right? There's four large platform companies that sold predominantly, if not exclusively, but predominantly to managed service providers, and they were creating a lot of momentum and a lot of news about our profession. And I'll be the first one to say that was really good. We needed that. Not only did we need innovation in that market, but we needed to grab the attention of outside of the MSP channel, outside of the IT channel, to pay attention to us and to really understand what was going on. What many of us who've been in this for 20 plus years knew and appreciated, that the work of the MSPs was too important to go unnoticed. So anyway, that's what we had, and which brings us to the second point. And I'm going to relay. Part of this is I can't get into too much of this because A, I don't have enough time, and B, we're going to talk about this in greater detail at MSP World Inspire, right? So a little bit of a plug, I understand that, but I don't have enough time to talk about this as deeply as I would. So I'm going to have to give you highlights. To understand the impact of vendors who sell to MSPs and the impact of private equity in that community, you have to understand two concepts, which I'll generally describe as value creation and value extraction. Economic, finance terms, but they're pretty easy to understand. When you are in a value creation mode, simply put, you are marshaling all of your resources, financial, economic, sales, HR, technical, marketing. You're marshaling those resources towards doing something valuable for your customers, in this case, the MSPs, because what you're trying to do is to acquire more and more and more MSPs who sign onto your platform. Pretty simple. Pretty straightforward, not rocket science, right? You all get this. And we had a lot of that. At different levels, we had a lot of that value creation from 2010 to probably 2020. And there was acquisition, right? The vendor platforms certainly took that private equity funding and they used it very wisely, I think, in many cases, to acquire underperforming assets that were out there in the market, to acquire and bolt on necessary tools that the MSPs that they served needed. And so these platform vendors said, well, we should go buy them. And that was their decision. And I'm not going to second guess that decision. What I have been told, I'll give you my opinion in Vegas at MSP World if you want it, but what I have been told, and I'm relaying this to all of you, and I'm a messenger, so don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you what I have been told. Starting at around 2020, and it had nothing to do with the pandemic, so these are completely coincidental time frames, but around 2020. There began to be a consistent murmur that became a low roar, which became right now a quiet scream. I call it a quiet scream because it doesn't get talked about a lot. It doesn't get written about a lot. But if you don't understand that it's happening, you got your head buried in the sand. All right. But the MSPs have been since 2020 growing increasingly uncomfortable with some of their vendor relationships and what I have been told is the lack of innovation. Now we're going to talk about that at MSP World in excruciating detail, what that is. But we know that this is happening. How do we know this is happening? Well, if you look back at previous MSPZone episodes, you'll hear us talking about this MSP reset or refresh. That is evidence. If you listen to that episode and read that, I think we posted an article about it as well. You'll actually learn about all of these MSPs who have been in business for 10, 15, 20 plus years, who are ripping out legacy relationship tool vendors and replacing them with modernized tools. Now, if everything was okay with their legacy vendors, why would they ever do that? Not like they just say, "Hey, I got nothing else to do. Let me go through a very costly and time intensive migration effort to swap out a ticketing platform or a backup vendor or an RMM vendor or whatever." You just don't do that lightly. You do it because you believe it's in your strategic best interest as an MSP to do that thing. So we can reverse engineer, we can deduce, we can use logic and reason to conclude that there has been and still is today some level of dissatisfaction. I am not going to say that all vendors are bad. I'm not saying that at all. Absolutely not saying it. But I would say that there is enough discontentment amongst the MSPs for certain companies that it is forcing some, but it's growing, MSPs to make radical decisions about very long-standing relationships. And that's a fact. That is not a speculation. That is not a theory. We're being told it. And if you want external evidence of that, we see it from the certification audit side. We see these MSPs who achieve their cyber verify. We see what vendors they're bringing to the table because they're being tested on them. So we see year to year what they're keeping, and we say, oh, they don't use that vendor anymore. They're using a different vendor. All right? We know it's happening. We know it's happening. So MSPs who pay attention to this, and it gets back to the leading up to value extraction, right? This is the economic, financial explanation for why the MSPs are discontented right now and are making these kind of big moves. It appears that some of these PE-backed vendors have, at some point in the last 5 years, transitioned into value extraction mode. What does that mean? Value extraction mode means that the investors in these vendor companies at some point want to ease back on the inflow of money from the investor to the vendor company, and they actually want to start taking that money back out, or the dividends out, or the profits out. They want to start extracting the value that they have helped create. You can understand that. They're business people, they're investors. They want to see a return on their investment. It is completely normal. We can have a discussion, we will have a discussion at MSP World Inspire about what is reasonable to expect in value extraction mode, whether it's unavoidable, whether it can be avoided, and whether, what options the MSPs have when they're dealing with one or multiple of their vendor partners who is absolutely in that value extraction cycle. But to ignore it and to say, oh, it's going to have no impact on my MSP practice, it would be foolish to take that position. So that's a very, very fast summary of private equity impact on the managed services vendor community. Now let's look at the impact of private equity on the MSPs themselves. And just like the vendors, private equity is certainly having an impact on the MSP organizations. And we've started to see, now I'll quick pause and detour. For those of you saying, when did this MSP impact of private equity start? The real answer to that is it started in the mid-90s during the dot-com era. But I'm not going to talk about that because for a number of reasons. Number one, it was fairly long ago. It's still important, but they were largely, the MSPs, focused on enterprise clients, different tool sets, different operational models, different business models. So I'm going to leave that as a kind of a footnote. But I'm going to start post 2010 of maybe around 2015 or so is when we started to see a very, it wasn't aggressive. Now it's aggressive. It was emerging in 2015 and on, where private equity companies were really laser focused on accumulating power and investment within the MSPs themselves. You may ask, well, Charles, I've seen private equity working and investing in MSPs for 20 years. You are correct. I'm not discounting that. I fully acknowledge that. What I'm talking about is at a macro level, I'm talking about widespread activity. I'm talking about not just one or two, isolated PE firms. I'm talking about very big numbers of private equity firms, big and small. Family, private wealth individuals, institutional PE firms, and everybody in between, all marching towards the MSP watering hole. And granted, a lot of this happened leading up to the pandemic and through the pandemic because of the security issues that we've been seeing. And they rightfully thought the best place to invest in the future is in the MSP market. Completely agree. I have no problem with that analysis. But just like with the vendors, we have to look at what actually is happening. And I'll share my thoughts again in Vegas at MSP World Inspire, but I will give you a little hint at what I've been told by MSPs, which is to say that there are some private equity firms that are doing some fantastic work in allowing legacy equity owners in MSP businesses to transition out and to go either do something else or to go retire. And we are seeing that. And that is an incredibly important role to play. And it is an incredibly important business outcome that we must deal with. None of us lives forever, right? You have to deal with longevity of these companies and the work that they do. And so this is natural. But then not everyone looks at it that way. Not everyone is content with that. And there are certainly some platforms out there who are maybe not doing everything that they could be doing. And that could be described as they're going too fast. They are not paying as much attention on integration of the acquisitions that they're doing. And so they're leaving a lot of inefficiencies on the table, and they're not dealing with them. And as a consequence, they're hemorrhaging customers and employees who are not staying on because they notice a change in the way that things are being done. And when you go through an acquisition, there's every expectation to have a goal of make it better. Otherwise, why do it at all, right? Make the end product the result of the acquisition better than what you had before. If that's not your goal, then why are you doing it? If that's not your outcome, then you maybe missed a step, and that should be something that you can learn from and do better the next time. And so we're gonna talk about that at MSP World in great detail, right? Because there's so many different business models when you deal not only with private equity involvement, but you get into M&A and the different types of M&A models, right? There's a lot of platforms that are doing good work in terms of just bolting on and allowing equity owners to cash out, but they still get to stay on and still earn a paycheck. But they're largely left alone as their own company, servicing their customers, like before. But the owners got to go into value extraction mode, but still have continuity, right? So that's very important, right? That's a really fantastic business outcome for private equity to play. Now, the follow-up question is private equity necessary for those value extraction moments? No. We're going to talk about that in Vegas as well. We're going to talk about value extraction mode, equity owner retirement transition models that involve private equity and some that don't. So, but you have to be honest with yourself and look at what actually is happening and see who's doing it well, who's not doing it so well, and just have a good discussion. And that's exactly what we're gonna have. The value extraction, I think that one of the lessons that I've learned and now I think is a very good measuring stick for all private equity involvement and for all M&A activity is, what did the acquisition or the merger actually do? What did it actually accomplish? And you can look at that from an investor standpoint. Did it make the investors happy? Did it allow them to do something that they were wanting to do, which may also include eventually extracting money off the table, being able to show to their original investors, hey, we made some money. It was a good investment. Let's do it again. Hopefully. But you also have to evaluate it from a integration, a business, the business of the MSP, the business of the customer being served, which is service delivery. You have to look at security. You have to look at efficiency of the combined, resulting entity. Are they operating better as a unit than they did before? If they did, great. That's a really good, well-executed acquisition or merger. If it's not, if you've got customers that are running for the door, saying, hey, this is not what I signed up for. I don't like it. I don't like what you're serving me. It doesn't taste good. I want to go someplace else. If you look at that and you come away with, hey, it was a good financial deal, it made sense, and you don't look at the customers, that's not smart. That's not smart. And you know what? We're absolutely hearing MSPs who are saying they're picking up business from some of these M&A deals that are showing up, and you're reading about in the news. I'm not saying that it's all across the board. I'm not saying that, folks. But I'm saying that has to be part of our evaluation as a profession moving forward about how we measure the success of mergers, acquisitions, and outside investors into the managed services profession. And we will do that, and we are doing that. But the purpose really of this episode and why I wanted to bring this up as a topic is to just get you to start thinking about this as a very real topic and a legitimate area of questioning, and to encourage continued ongoing activity and attention and investment from the private equity community, which I think we all want. You have to have these questions raised, reasonably discussed, and have conclusions that are reasonable and well reasoned, right? You have to have thought through and look at it from all sides. The investors have to make out clear, but so do the MSPs, and so do the customers. And if we don't look at all of those facets and examine them all very carefully, we may miss something and we may end up doing more harm than needed to be done and doing harm that could have been avoided. So I hope you go check out MSP World Inspire. It's coming up in September 12th and 13th in Las Vegas. Go check it out. Go to msballiance.com. You'll find the link there. And we'd love to have you there. It's going to be a fantastic show. See you then.